So this is part 2 of our Thanksgiving message. We'll end up in Hebrews 9:15 in just a moment. So the message today is titled Thanksgiving Family Covenant. So what in the world does that mean? All right, it's going to be a little bit different kind of a message today because we're going to talk a little bit about history. But it's very appropriate. Read a couple things here to start out, just to set the stage. Matthew Spalding, who's an author, a great historian, he's the author of We Still Hold These Truths, Rediscovering Our Principles, Reclaiming Our Future. He says, of the many influences that shaped the American concept of liberty, the first and most formative was faith. Indeed, America was the first country in all of history that was deliberately formed to protect and promote religious freedom. And our founders noted that when they said that people don't give freedom, God does. People don't give freedom. God does. So in 1620, how many years ago was that? 400. Roughly 4 or 5 generations back. The Pilgrims, seeking to practice Christianity within their own community, wrote a very interesting document. I wish Sophie was here today to help me with some of these things. She's been studying that. You know what it is, Maggie? You know what the Pilgrims wrote first off? What their first thing was they wrote? The Mayflower Compact. And in the compact, it states that their new colony was established for what? For trade, commerce. Yeah. In quote, for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith. So before they got off the boat, here's where the fun part comes in. Before they got off the Mayflower, guess when they wrote this? November 21, this weekend. This weekend, 400 years ago, some amazing things took place in the history of our country. There were actually several events planned around our country for today and for this weekend that got canceled because of all the various reasons. But we're not going to cancel it here today. We're going to look at it. The spirit of the Mayflower Compact is reflected in other documents that we know about. Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution. And each of these documents, the dignity and value of every human being as a principle of Christian faith is included. So let's just look. Declaration of Independence. America's history is unique in that our founding fathers designed a government to protect our God-given rights. Evidence of this can be clearly seen in the Declaration of Independence, where our founders penned these words, and here we're quoting. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. What an incredible statement. Why are we talking about this today? Talking about this because we need to set out our stones, just like they did many years ago. People say, well, how did we get into some of the situations that we're into now? When you watch the media and you hear the chatter around town and you see all the freedoms that have been taken away from us and for all the freedoms that we're taking away from ourselves. Again, we didn't get here overnight. We have to have a time where we can go back and we can look at the stones and we can say, we need to remember these things. So ask yourself, what are the things that we need to remember? And that's what we're going to cover today. Many people have called the Mayflower Compact a covenant. And so I'm thinking, well, a covenant is something in the Bible that's very important. So we want to look at that too. So our kids, we need to pass on the generation of our beliefs to our children, and to their children, and to their children. So just like what we're doing, we're working on starting Sunday school, working on doing the different remembrances. We've already said, December 20, we're going to remember one of the greatest events in all of history, and that's Jesus' birth. Remember, we're going to remember that by putting on the clothes they were back then, saying things that they said back then. If we don't teach these things to our children, who do you think is going to do it? You think the schools are going to do it? Nope. Think government's going to do it? Nope. Media's going to do it? Nope. We have to do it. We have to do it. Our children need to know our heritage in America. I got a quote from Ben Franklin. I'm going through history. Ben Franklin said it best during the Constitutional Convention, 1787. He said, "I have lived a long time. The longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs the affairs of men. If a sparrow cannot even fall to the ground without his notice, isn't it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We have been assured, my fellow Americans, in the sacred writings, that except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain that build it." In other words, there's no sense in building your house, being in charge of your business and your family and your coworkers. It's all in vain if God's not a part of it and in charge of it. I've started to read a book this week. It's very interesting. It was just written not too long ago called "They Knew They Were Pilgrims: Plymouth Colony and the Contest for American Liberty." It goes back and it looks at all little details of what happened in America many years ago. Definition of a pilgrim, was a pilgrim. We always talk about pilgrims at Thanksgiving. What's a pilgrim? A dude with a black suit and a big hat. That was some of them. Puritans and separatists. They dressed a little differently than we do today. But a pilgrim is somebody that's on a pilgrimage. You are headed to a sacred place for a holy reason. That's a pilgrim. Somebody that's headed there. I guess you could say we're all pilgrims. We're all kind of headed to the promised land. Now, in this book, what's interesting about it, which I really liked, it kind of reminded me of the first disciples and what all they had to endure after Jesus ascended into heaven. They were a motley crew. They were sinners, some of the worst sinners you probably read about, including Paul, just like us, right? So the book says, and there's a summary here, a book I read about the pilgrims, that the pilgrims at Plymouth, they weren't the backwater colony depicted by some earlier historians, but rather they were a vibrant theological, economic, political, and cultural community that was engaged in the struggle for dominance in the New World. Why am I telling you all this? Because there's been a great push over the past 25 years to discredit a lot of American history, including this story. People wanted even to change the name of Thanksgiving Day to certain different names. People wanted to say that the early settlers were awful, horrible people and maiming and killing the Indians and these kinds of things. Well, I think to understand American history, just like anything else, you have to understand what all they were struggling with. They got on a boat, a big, stinky, cold, huge wooden boat, left way after they should have, because things kept going against them. All the odds were against them, except they just said, we've got to do this for our faith. That's what they kept saying. God's going to protect us. It's not like it is today. They were headed out in a big, wooden, scary ship out in the middle of the ocean, a place they had never been to before. No TVs. Many of them knowing that they're not going to come back. But they did it because of their faith. They also got on this boat with 20 crewmen that were roughneck, sailor-type people. They got on this boat with other strangers that didn't believe the way that they did. People that were going out for various reasons. It wasn't just a couple happy families that said, let's go take a vacation. This was an embark into the unknown. This is a pilgrimage to what they were hoping was going to be a sacred land that they were going to. But they really had no idea exactly where they were going to end up. They almost had to turn around. They left too late. It got too cold. And have you ever been just really cold? It's really cold and it's like I can't get warm. Just think about being on that boat. And if you've ever been out in the middle of the ocean and you can't see land anywhere, I've done that before. It's a really odd feeling. You don't know. You turn around a couple times, you don't know which way to go. You're like, I think land's over there. Just think about them going out there for months, all living together in this ark. And there were some animals on there. They had to eat. They didn't have warm showers. It was very cold. There were some that didn't make it on the way. There were some that were born on the way. What an amazing story. They were doing it for a reason much greater than themselves. So how do we get from all that to Thanksgiving? Here's a couple things we're going to run through real quick, and I'll show you how covenant fits into it. One of the travelers, Edward Winslow, gave glory to God and attributed to God the blessings that they enjoyed along the way. Even though the pilgrims worked very hard and were thankful to the Indians to help them in the New World when they arrived, they did recognize that, and quote, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. That's in the book of James. So despite how hard we work or how many blessings we receive from others, he said, we must realize where all blessings come from, and that's God, our provider. They went out there, there's no way just to say, we're going to jump off this boat and we're going to get some food. We're going to call DoorDash and they're going to bring it out to our boat. They were just out there, stuck. If they starved, they starved. They lived, they lived. You can imagine all those people together. I would imagine there were some pretty heated arguments from time to time, all living together. They ended up making little cabins within the boat because at first they were all just kind of out there sleeping and drinking and eating together. And then before too long, there's a couple diaries of people that have written that's still around that said, well, we decided to start making little houses within the boat. So the families started making put up little boards and things within the boat. So it's funny to read all those kind of things. It kind of sounds like something we would all do. So they persevered and they landed in the wrong place. You can imagine. It didn't work out. They had to go back around somewhere else and land and eventually and settle in Plymouth. And so we have to understand the struggles they faced. They had no idea what they were going into. They had been on this boat for a long time, and the last thing they were going to do was be killed when they got ashore. So when you think that came with them, they were skittish. You can read the accounts of it. They didn't know that the people that they landed there were going to kill them with shotguns, bows, and arrows, or what. They pretty much said, we're going to take out anything that moves. So the Mayflower Compact basically said the covenant they made among themselves with God's blessing was, we don't know what's going to happen when we go ashore, but let's do it together. Let's do it together. Let's fight the good fight for the liberty of what we came to fight in the presence of Almighty God. That was the compact that led to all the other wonderful documents that our country has. Thanksgiving was made a national event. George Washington made the following proclamation on October 3rd, 1789. He said, whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God. Now, therefore, I do recommend and assign Thursday, the 26th of November, next to be devoted by the people of these states to the service of the great and glorious King, meaning God, who is the beneficent author of all good that is and that will be. That's how Thanksgiving started. It became an annual event when, again, at difficult times, country was struggling in a horrible civil war. Sometimes I feel like we have the pinnings of a civil war in the background right now. Our country is divided in so many ways. It was an annual event by President Lincoln, October 3rd, 1863, and he said, "I do therefore unite my fellow citizens in every part of the United States, and also those who are at sea, those who are in foreign lands, because I'm going to set apart and observe the last Thursday of November next as a day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father who dwells in the heavens." Abraham Lincoln said, "We're going through difficult times, but now we're going to make this an annual event. We're going to give thanks to God even though things are difficult." 1939, President Roosevelt, how do we get to where it is now on the date, right? President Franklin Roosevelt changed it to the fourth Thursday, and his concern was a little different. His changed to the fourth Thursday due to the urging of a retail association and of concern for the economy. The purpose of this change was to extend the shopping days between Thanksgiving and Christmas with the goal of stimulating the economy as they tried to recover from the Great Depression. A lot going on. Again, right, the Great Depression. I heard a lot of stories from my grandparents about the Great Depression. Now, my grandfather stood in line. They didn't have anything. Stood in line, he got bread and milk. He said that lasted us 2 weeks. Like I can't imagine. But in all these difficult times, people came together to still acknowledge thanks to God. It must mean something. So when you come together on a common goal like this, in the Bible there were covenants. Those are like agreements made between people and God. There's several covenants in the Bible, especially in the early days. There's several big covenants that brought us through our faith history. And then we'll see how those relate to us in Thanksgiving. First one was a covenant with Noah. Remember Noah? Noah was the first Mayflower. First boat, first ark. Bunch of people. They don't know where the promised land is going to be. They don't know where they're going to land. God wiped out the face of the earth because, why? People. It's like, we're going to try this again. But God said, covenant, all right, I'm not going to do that anymore. Let's hope you learn your lesson. Did they? No. But he's given us more opportunities. Second covenant was through Abraham. God enters a relationship with Abraham. And what does he do? He promises him he's going to be blessed beyond measure. And the whole world is going to be blessed through him. That's the Abraham covenant. It says you're going to have a huge family. The whole world's going to be blessed through your family. So basically 3 parts of Abraham's covenant. Your offspring, you're going to multiply, you're going to have land, and then somehow, through you, Abraham, we're going to bless the whole world through all eternity. And Abraham's like, what? I don't know how that's going to happen. That's in Genesis. Third covenant, Moses. Good old Moses. Taking the people, going out. He's the ultimate pilgrim. Don't even know where he's going. Most people in our faith history never knew where they were going. Kind of like us today. Where are we headed? Moses, God rescues Israel from slavery in Egypt, right? Promises to make him his own possession. You're going to be my people. I'm going to be your God. We're going to make it through this together. And that's what Joshua was laying the stones out for. And then one of the last covenants that ushers in Jesus, David's covenant. God establishes David as a king over Israel, promises to make his name great. You're going to have a royal kingdom, just like the promises I made to Abraham before you. And you're going to rise up a descendant who's going to bless the whole world through your family, David. David's like, what? Are you sure? So, through all these agreements from a long time ago, agreements that were made 400 years ago today, 400 years ago this weekend. What an amazing thing today, 400 years ago this weekend. The covenant was made for people that said, no matter what, when we leave here, we're doing this to the glory of God. They had a lot of challenges. Did they do everything right? No. But we have no right to change history. We have no right to go back and say those people did everything wrong. That's incorrect. History is history. We cannot erase it. Factual. They were not perfect people. They did bad things. They did good things, but they did it all unto the glory of God. They figured it out. And that's how our country started. We have a sign on the door of our place that says, "As for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord." When people began spreading across America, a lot of those signs were being hung up over doors. This house, we're going to serve the Lord. Not sure what you're doing over there. And that's okay, because it's America. You have a freedom to do whatever you want to do over there, as long as it doesn't infringe on my rights. But as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Again, that's Joshua 24:15. So I ask you today, for this weekend, and next week, and all this next week, as we celebrate the event to commemorate what people before us have done, what is going to be your family covenant? So I encourage you to write it down for your kids to see. A lot of times just writing down and post it. Put it by your turkey. Pray it. Don't just say, "God, thank you for the food, let's eat." Let's go a little deeper than that this year. What stones are you going to set out for your kids to remember and see for generations to come this Thanksgiving? Remember, it's a 400-year anniversary. Tell them that. Tell them that story. Tell them that story. 400 years ago, people did some amazing things that we're going to talk about this year at Thanksgiving. I kind of thought, well, what are going to be our 4 covenant points for our family this year? So I wrote them down. You make your own. Don't copy mine. You might have some different things, right? Our first covenant to God this year is duty to God and His Word. We're going to do everything unto the glory of God and His Word. We're going to read the Bible more. We're going to study more. We're going to understand it more throughout the year and give thanks for the people that have died to enable us to have the Bible. Duty to God and His Word. Duty to church. We need to make sure we understand that the churches, they don't just happen. People toil and sweat to make this building. Believe me, my family toils and sweats on Sunday morning to make it here by 10:30. This morning I said, you know what? God can part the Red Sea. We'll make it there by 10:30. Like 10:29, we pulled in the parking lot. And He did part the Red Sea this morning, I'll tell you that right now. Duty to church. If you're going to be a part of a church, you need to go to it. Doesn't do anybody good to just say lip service to something. Strive to meet together. Duty to educating our kids. And when I say our kids for our family, that means my kids, that means my extended church family, making sure they understand what we're talking about. Again, if we don't tell them, who's going to do it? And duty to our community, people around us. We can't be those people that just shut ourselves away and don't talk to our neighbors and don't get involved in our community, because how are they ever going to know what we're talking about? The message of Christianity spreads because you get involved in your community and get involved in people's lives. And it's hard to do. It's messy. Sometimes you don't like to do it because you're thinking, I've got to go do something. I've got 10 minutes, and all of a sudden my neighbor wants to talk. And I want to say, I don't have time for that. I want to, but I can't. What if somebody told me when I was young, I don't have time for you? I remember one of the people that made the greatest impact in my life was an Irish sailor. And I was 8 years old. He was a custodian in our church, and everybody was all running around. Mom played the piano, Dad was a deacon, everybody I knew was involved in ministry at some point, and just like our family, all running around like crazy trying to get everything ready for church. And this guy always made time to talk to an 8-year-old boy. Of course, he kind of looked like Popeye. He had big tattoos and submarines and a little round hat. He was a really large guy. But he always bent way down to talk to me. With an accent, an Irish accent. How you doing there, Mr. Graves, this morning? You're looking mighty fine. But he made time for me. We have to make time for our kids, our community. We have to impact people in ways that God allows us to. So what is the new covenant? Hebrews 9:15. You can find a verse this year that you want to read with your family at Thanksgiving. This one's an awesome one because we worked through the other covenants. So how did God fulfill all these promises he made to Moses and David and Noah and Abraham? Hebrews chapter 9, verse 15, Paul reminds us. So Christ brings a new agreement, a new covenant, from God to his people. He brings this agreement so those who are chosen by God, us, can have the blessings of God, promised blessings that last forever. This can happen only because Christ died to free people from sins committed against the commands of the first commandment, the first covenant, the first agreement. Our very first command from God was what? You know what it was? There were things back in Genesis. Remember all those things that we were supposed to do and not do that we did anyway? There is no way out of sin. Don't eat of that tree. The original sin condemned us. The one that sets us free is also the first Adam, which is Jesus. Because of his death on the cross, the ultimate freedom we get from the covenant that God has made with us, there's no way out of it. We cannot keep our deal up. We cannot fulfill our part of the agreement without Christ dying on the cross and resurrecting. That's how the agreement gives us freedom now. We talk about freedom in America. Freedom from your sin starts personally because of what Christ has done for us. And then we can take that good news and spread it around the world and especially uphold it in America. There are other people in our country that believe differently. That's okay. But we need to at least make sure that we're imparting to our kids and future generations what God has done for us and what God has done for us personally. That's what it's all about.